We live in a time where masculinity is shamed and men don't know what it means to be a man. As a pastor and counselor, I've spent the better part of my life equipping and training others. My goal with this show is to translate my hard-earned experience into tools and tactics to help you become stronger as a man. This is the BraveCo podcast. I'm your host, Jason Vellet.
Well, welcome back to the BraveCo podcast. Men, this week I have one of my best friends on the entire planet, Todd Pierce, Mr. Todd Pierce. Gosh, what do I say about you? Well, for those men who don't know who Todd Pierce is, I pity the fool. No, Todd has a ministry called Riding High Ministries, and he just has the most incredible ministry because you break wild horses in front of a whole group of people, right? And it's this incredible story playing out in front of people about your relationship with God, right? So when you're breaking a wild horse, you are taking this animal that's terrified, for starters, to be confined. It's terrified to have a human on it or around it. And you're doing it in such a loving, caring, honoring way that eventually at the end of the 2 hours, that animal has allowed you access into its life because it wants connection and it wants relationship and it's learned to trust. And that's like our relationship with God, which we don't have to go into a ton, but that is a great picture of what you do. The other side to it is you get your butt kicked. You get bucked off, smashed into the fence. I remember the first time that I watched you do this was at the Wildcatter Ranch in Texas, in Graham, Texas. And man, that horse was having its way with you. But but you stuck in there. And again, that's part of the relationship building process that God goes through with us, right? Because we have so many different places in our life where we would try to buck God. We try to get away from him. And we are deathly afraid of the intimacy that he's asking for and requiring. So that's one thing that you do. You do that in prisons. You do that for churches. You do that for leadership teams. I mean, it's just such a phenomenal ministry. On top of that, you're a great husband. You're also a great dad. You got boys, got a bunch of cool boys who are also wild men that love God. And so, Todd, it's such an honor to have you on here, have you share some of your story about where you're at in life. But thank you so much, man.
Thank you, Jay. And I know everybody listening knows who you are, but just who you are to me. And, you bring to even a cowboy dude like myself that really would rather hide behind his strength. You've given a whole bunch of men permission to be vulnerable, and that's just so not a part of the culture I was raised in. So thank you for bringing this to the world.
No, it's awesome. I'd love to just talk a little bit about your career and some of the lessons that you learned in that. And I'm going to tell people a little bit of your backstory because I know that you would, but I want to get into some of the meat of your life. But okay. Your backstory is you grew up pretty lonely. Your horse and your dog were your best friend. Yeah. And which I just, on one side, I'm like, gosh, I love that guy. Like, I wish I could have grown up and hung out with you. On the flip side, a pretty lonely home and not a lot of friends and stuff. But then you became a professional bareback rider for the PBR. So I fast forward a lot in your life, but that's kind of what I want to pick up on a little bit is your professional career in rodeo and then how you transitioned fully into ministry. But Todd, how did you get into rodeo? How did you get to the place where you wanted to get on the back of a horse and show off?
Man, that would be as short or long a story as it would. We got time here for, but the short of it is, straight out of high school, I became a jockey. So I was riding racehorses, And which, if you're not familiar with the racehorse industry, if all you watch is the races, you're missing most of the fun, because getting a horse to that place where they're ready to race, they're bred for fire, and they're typically, especially in the Southeast Idaho small world, it was just get them broke enough that they could run in a straight line and turn left. So there was no manners required. You didn't need to stop. You didn't need to know how to turn right. It was just run as hard as you can and be able to turn left. And so I would get these horses, and you don't have much of a saddle. It's, a very small saddle with very short stirrups and nothing really to hang on to. And so I had a buddy that was working at the track, and he was talking about, what a stud he was and riding bulls. And I'm like, dude, I can ride anything with hair on it. If I can ride these things, I can ride anything. And I really hadn't been around the rodeo culture, even, raised small town, did the horse thing, but really wasn't around a rodeo culture. So I didn't really know what I was talking about, but there happened to be our local rodeo that coming weekend. He's like, oh yeah, bring it. And you can't just show up at a rodeo and get on typically, but he knew people who knew people, and there were horses that weren't going to have a rider. They were turned out, is what they call it. And so they were horses that guys had drawn and decided not to show up for. And so I got on these horses with borrowed gear and loved it. And I was already, just this kamikaze type personality that, we've talked about. Maybe I've got a brain defect, because most humans are born with this danger ahead, stop, turn around. And I don't have that thing. So things that should have.
I do just want to clarify that for people that are that may have missed that. The honest truth about you is that you really honestly, without trying, don't have the normal fear, like warning Will Robertson, you better turn around. There's like, you don't have that type, like when it comes to hold my beer type of situations, right? Like, hey, you ever see this? Hold my beer. You don't have that. So you'll do, like, for instance, a good story is we were riding horses at our last shooting school, and there's a really, really steep, like gnarly, rocky downhill. And I'm like, oh, dude, there's no way that I would ever even think about going down that. I was like, Todd, would you ride down that? You didn't even say anything. You just bailed your horse off the edge and just straight down through all the shale and stuff. And like, you just don't. And because of that, you've broken like half the bones in your body as well. So that's the downside. But the upside is you just live this fearless, freaking courageous life. So I'm just trying to paint this picture. Like, what guy goes from being a jockey to like the same, that next weekend being like, yeah, just put me in the rodeo. I'm good on borrowed gear. Todd Pierce, hold my beer. Yeah.
Well, and so it sounds really cool. Almost like watching it on TV would be cool. It does come with a lot of, you write a lot of checks you can't cash, and, you weed out, you put bravery and courage in the same thing. Like, I wasn't brave because I didn't have fear. Like, it was fearless. So I didn't need courage. And so courage comes when you actually have to overcome a fear. But so it started at a really young age that I was like, there's nothing I can't do. Like, I can't die. So let's just go for it. So that started the whole thing. Like, what makes me want to was, one, that it's hard. I liked doing hard things. Everything I'd done athletically up until that point, from gymnastics to wrestling, pole vaulting, really aggressive sports, really made it to where I was in training to do this particular sport really well, especially because I had a savvy with horses. And so I went from, just in a short amount of time, a couple of years, of not getting on very many horses to becoming professional. And although I bypassed a whole lot of the skill sets that I should have gained, because there really is some technique to it and some things that I should have learned along the way, but it did turn into a beautiful career where we were able to, for 6 years, we traveled to over 100 rodeos a year, and all over the US and Canada. And it was, for me, a real formative time as well. You know, I was newly married, brand new Christian, truly in love with Jesus, but just barely saved. Like, I don't know if you know those dudes. Maybe a lot of you are listening to it. It's like, I didn't know how not to swear. I didn't know how, I was still, drinking like a fish and chewing tobacco and devoted to my wife. So I wasn't a womanizer. I at least got broke off of that. That came with salvation, was just that deliverance. But I was still kind of hell on wheels, but in love with Jesus. And God's goodness, I think, is really what I get to do with horses now. I think it really was just exemplified in those early on years of me wanting to take all of this, whatever that I was, and turn it into something that was useful for the people that I cared about. So
I don't want to move on past your early rodeo years just yet, because there's some juice in there. What happened that first week? Did you actually ride? Like, did you successfully ride?
Yeah, it was actually pretty hilarious, because I had been on the racetrack, and some of these horses would go crazy and they'd end up flipping on the ground with you. And so if a racehorse goes to the ground with you, the men that I was around, they'd get on the horse and make the horse stay on the ground until it didn't want to be on the ground. So the punishment for throwing itself on the ground was you'll stay there. It's kind of like you keep them in timeout. And in rodeo, you're not, it's a different culture, right? Yeah. So my first horse I rode, I didn't do anything, I just rode him. But the second horse was actually a saddle bronc horse. And so this horse went out and ended up flipping over and landed on my leg. And my immediate instinct was to jump on its head. So I jump on the head of this horse and I'm holding him on the ground. Well, the stock contractor, the dude that owns the horse, he's going, ape shit on me. And he's this big old bearded dude, and he crawls over the chutes, and I'm thinking I'm doing this like, dude, this horse needs to learn some manners. And so anyway, he wasn't happy with the whole situation. And plus my leg got really squashed, and we were supposed to go to a party that night. So we went to the hospital and borrowed a wheelchair. And so that was my ride for the night, was, a 6-pack of beer and a wheelchair. But that was my first rodeo.
The rodeo world's crazy. I don't think that a lot of people understand just how insane that sport is, right? Because when we think about sports, especially in America, you think about football and basketball and soccer, and maybe you throw ping pong in there and like a golf, right? But rodeo is on a whole different level. I mean, even a whole different level from football, because in rodeo, for starters, like, you guys are way underfunded. Mm-hmm. It's not like there's a couple of guys in rodeo that make a living doing it, like that actually do good doing it. There's a whole bunch of starving, homeless guys. Like really, a rodeo is like a bunch of homeless guys that come together to ride animals.
It really is. Yeah. The sport has progressed considerably in the last 25 years, but it still is, man. You're
like when you started, for sure.
Yeah. Even when you're really good, you're starving. And you've got very little control over anything but yourself, because even the animal that you're going to ride, it's all a draw. You may or may not even know what the horse is like or what its history is. Bull riding is the same thing. So there's really no preparation that you can go. You can't do anything to prepare for anything other than your own skill and your own equipment.
It's so crazy because and then you only have 8 seconds to like figure that thing out. There's no like halftime or, you know what I'm saying? You don't get a redo. I mean, once in a while, like if something goes wrong with the bull or the horse, they'll give you a redo. I can't even remember, like I saw a strap fall off the bull one time and they're like, that guy can get a redo. Or a horse that I think I saw in this last rodeo. I don't know if the horse didn't even buck or something and they gave the guy a redo. But it's not like you've got time in your 8 seconds to think through like, this isn't really going well. I need to like make a pivot. It happens so fast. That sport is there's not much margin for error.
Yeah. And what that does, mentally, I don't even know really how to develop that muscle other than you just have to do it, because not only is your livelihood or your personal health on the line, but you've had maybe 24 hours to think about what you're going to go do. And you're driving through the night eating hot dogs to get there. And you show up and all of the suspense, all of the preparation, all of the expense, it really comes down to you nod your head and it's over like that. And so based on how well you do, you may or may not win. Even if you did the perfect ride, half the score comes from the animal, which you've got no influence over. And so it really does get to where if you want to learn what it's like to at least have some personal fortitude, that everything around me is out of my control. The only thing I have control over is what I do. And it, really does. It's a unique thing that we do. But it also creates a sense of community. There is a ton of honor in it. You're doing stuff with other men that have, making the same decisions. And there's obviously a bunch of toxicity in that culture as well, because you're, there's a lot of numbing going on with, and you're addicted to attention from people. So you're performing in front of crowds. So it's not just the judges that you want to do well for, but you're now in front of, large crowds of people. And it's, so it comes with the same temptations of every other sport, only you're not really getting paid for it. And you have very little opportunity to demonstrate your skill.
Yeah, no, I have so much respect for those guys that are able to go week after week after week, right? Their body's getting broken. It's really hard to take a week off because you need the money. And at the same time, you love the sport too. So I'm just so much respect for guys that are able to do that. Couple other questions that I always have is, dude, how do you not just completely demolish your testicles when you're like, you know what I'm saying? Like your hands down by your crotch, right? And then you just you get like real cinched up in there, right? And how it happens, and then your hand is, so for those of you who've never watched, especially bull riding, your hand's tied in. You're like cinched up, right up against your hand, into your crotch, and then boom, you're gone. But even bareback riding, how do you not just freaking crush your testicles every ride? Bro, that's a legit question.
I could show you or draw.
Yeah, show me. Yeah, no, show me.
You need to pull your nuts up.
For reals? Is that part of it?
You don't want them down. So your testicles have a great ability to go inside. It's like shrinkage factor, only you intentionally have to just arrange the furniture to where they're not getting squished. I don't think I've ever actually hurt my nuts riding.
What?
Yeah, I've hurt a lot of things, but now your taint, which if you're familiar,
yeah,
that's where you're getting pounded. And
God,
so
dude.
prostate type stuff later on in life, can become an issue just because that area of your body there's nothing there to protect it. So we do have there's actually a pad that because it's a rawhide and leather rigging is what you're riding with in bareback riding. And so there is a pad that you can put there to help lessen that. But yeah, it is a good question.
Did you put one of those pads there when you rode?
Yeah, we called them the pussy pad.
Bro,
I'm sorry.
I bet you guys did.
Because everybody had them, but it's only because we started designing riggings in a way that it was sharp and hard. So you did not want to be pounded against it.
Gosh dang. The other question I have is, what's the worst injury that you've had on a horse? Like doing rodeo? Like, what's the scariest moment you've had in rodeo?
The scariest. So I got knocked out while I was riding. And so you're in a rig and kind of like a bull rope. You can get stuck in it because if you come off away from your hand, if you can see my hand.
Can you explain the rigging?
Okay, it's like a suitcase handle that your hand is wedged in.
Okay.
And you're not just hanging on with your grip. You actually wedge it in there. And once your hand is shut, when things are set up right, which is part of what you got to do, that hand's not coming out of there. I'm not just hanging on with muscle. It's wedged in there. And so if you get bucked off and you go towards your hand, it'll eventually pull out of the rigging. If you get bucked off, like I'm right-handed, if I get bucked off on the left side, my hand is now above me and my palm is now over the top of my fingers. So I can't let go. So I got knocked out on this horse and hung up away from my hand. So my hand is stuck. And when I came to, I was already being drugged through the arena by the horse. And I had a knee brace on that, from a knee injury that I'd had previously. And so when I came to, I'm already, the horse is at a full sprint dragging me, and my rigging slid down, and now I'm underneath the horse.
Oh.
And I'm doing everything I can, of course, to get my hand out, but the whole time the horse is running, his back feet are all over my legs and just stepping on me, and ripped my chaps off, ripped my pants off. My knee brace was like down around my ankle like a tin can. And so miraculously, they got the horse stopped, and miraculously the only thing that I had was just a whole lot of my skin taken off and no real injury. But it was scary because I was there long enough and coherent enough to know that this is how you die. And because I couldn't get away from his feet. And
I feel like there should be a guy that's just up there, like above the announcer, just with a gun. You know what I mean? He's like, I just got to put that horse down.
Take him out.
Yeah,
I was wishing, well, we've got two guys that are on horses that are out there and their job is to stop that horse in that instant. And not sure what happened, but it took them too long to get that horse stopped.
But they got fired? How's that?
I don't know if they got fired. They never get paid very well anyway. But
it's two volunteers on some mules.
Both of them are saying, "Hey, dude, hold my beer. I got to go get this." Yeah. No, they're actually really good at what they do. It happens.
How did you get knocked out? Was it one of those deals where you out of time and you came down and he came up?
No, it was a horse that was pretty notorious for this. He as he went forward, my head went back and his hip came up and his hip bone just hit me in the back of the head. So I was actually riding him properly. It's just that he was so strong, he would snatch my head back and my head hit his hip.
Holy smokes.
Yeah.
Man, that sucks. The craziest thing to me is like, that's one weekend, right? The very next weekend, you got to go and ride again.
Oh, no. We don't get a whole weekend. It's the next night because you'll be in
gosh,
three or four rodeos a weekend.
So you get done with that. You dust yourself off, pull your knee brace back up.
Yeah. There's no concussions. What do they call it? Protocol.
Yeah.
It's like, dude, can you see? And I'm like, mostly. Like, just point me towards him. And no, it really, I had probably 15 to 20 full knockout concussions. And so it's a real thing. And, it didn't affect me clearly. But you couldn't take time off. You really couldn't.
Yeah.
And,
I think why I highlight it so much is because that's like the world that you grew up in, and the world that you came out of is this like, I mean, you really do have to be tough, right? You have to be tough. You can't feel sorry for yourself. On one hand, like the work ethic of a real cowboy, tough as freaking nails, dude. Just the ability to go and go. The downside of that is the stuff that we're going to talk about in a minute is emotionally, right? Like your whole emotional world and like the real vulnerability where you're going like, man, I'm in a lot of pain emotionally or mentally or physically. Like you guys, it's almost like you can't live there. And I mean, there's probably guys that do it well, but that's not how you grew up. Like you didn't go like, man, I feel really, really scared today to get on this horse because I just got beat up and I got all these injuries. Like you're stuffing all that stuff down, right? Emotionally and physically. And
yeah, Jay, to be really honest with you, the competitive side, the traveling, the injuries, the finances, it was hard. It's not a joke. You can't be a sissy.
Mm-hmm.
But that wasn't, my story well enough. That wasn't the hard part. The hard part was I had a woman that I loved. And I, now I'm even had a child. By the end of my career, I had 2 kids. And so I didn't go into rodeo with a great skill set on how to do relationship. And then you take a very narcissistic sport that makes it to where everything really is about you. It's not I'm not a team player. Mm-hmm. I don't work with a team, and guys just know that we'll help each other out, but it's you. There's nobody there to help you. You don't have a coach. You don't have a support team. You've got a few buddies that best they can do is hand you beer and slap you on the back and say, it'll be all right. And that's really legitimately them loving you is, dude, I know it just sucks. Tomorrow will be better. And that's the extent of the encouragement. My wife actually wants to leave. We're in Texas. She doesn't want to even be in the camper with me. What do I do? I don't know, dude. You want to send her home with the camper? You can jump in with us. That's their solution.
Yeah.
And that it's not just a bunch of meatheads,
no.
but nobody really knows what am I supposed to do when, okay, she actually wants something from me other than my rodeo career and, whatever I thought would be good sex. There's more to this than that. Like you want more than just getting to hang out with me. And so that was when things got super tough, is that I wasn't built to just say, well, to hell with you. I'm sorry you're unhappy. see you later.
Yeah.
I really cared, and cared so much that, now I'm willing to do anything to make this right.
It's funny to hear about your life story and your past, because the guy I know today, you're like one of the most tender, compassionate, like in touch with your heart, like wise men I know. And yet you started out at such a, so far away from that because of the culture. And how did you, like, at what point did you realize like something in my life's got to change? And I've got a wife that's needs more connection. I need to grow personally. Like, what happened? Hey, BraveCo men, I am here to tell you about our BraveCo testimony book, the Father's Edition. This is chock full of incredible testimonies of God coming through for men, for marriages, for finances. And here's why it's important. In Revelations, it says that we overcome by the blood of the Lamb and the word of our testimony. And that is what happens when you get other people's testimonies as you get their breakthrough. And so I want you to check out this book. If you want something that you can give to your son, you can give to your father, you can give to a friend that will really help them out in life, this book is it. You can go to braveco.org and pick up your copy today.
Well, it clearly comes in waves, but why it's good for me to hear myself even tell my own story. It's good because we need to have the encouragement of, man, God has been so ruthlessly after me, and so patient and so kind. And but the humility, I think, really came when I realized that the person I cared about the most is hurting the most at my hand, and I can't stop it. And even though I wasn't a great listener, I still heard what she was saying. And I had to realize that, okay, I've mastered not blaming other people in my profession. You can't blame anybody for anything, because it just goes right to the next rodeo, and it'll ruin you. It'll take what power you have and you give it away because you don't want to carry what's being dealt you. And so I couldn't just dish this off. And so I guess the humility that came with me saying that I don't have the tools, I don't have the skill set, I don't know what to do. And so at that point in life, fortunate for very key men that came along and helped, because I'm truly born again. Like, I've got the Spirit of God, the same Spirit that rose Jesus from the dead is within me. Surely I can do this. And me and Jesus, we're going to make this right. And I meant it. It's just that it wasn't working. And so a lot of history, but I went from being kind of at the peak of my career to having an injury that turned into what is now known as the end of my career. I didn't know it at the time, but I started mentoring other men in my own brokenness and realizing, man, nobody knows really what to do. And I don't even have the answers for them. And so the huge breakthroughs for me, as embarrassing as it is to say that I did 15 years of ministry, still just giving pretty surface level answers to really deep hurting men, that we got connected with Bethel and teaching that was coming. Danny Silk, I remember the first time, my wife encouraged me strongly to, and I'm not a reader, so reading a book called Loving Your Kids on Purpose. And somewhere along the way, through a man named Andy Taylor, I had adopted this idea that I want to father my kids the same way God is fathering me. and he's bothering me so gently and so intentionally. And why are we teaching our kids about a new covenant Jesus and we're raising them in an old covenant home? And just this whole world opened up to me that, oh, I don't have to do it just however I feel like doing it. And I don't have to do it the way my parents did it. There actually is keys in Scripture on how to have a kingdom home and how to get healing for what's going on within you. And, things like culture of honor, just monumental whole universes open up. And then through mine and your relationship, Jay, emotional awareness, just self-awareness, emotional intelligence, brand new language. And so it happened way earlier than I realized, but looking back on it, there's a whole bunch of men that are just trying to give it a really good go, and they're trying their best, and they're trying to steward their part of the relationship, even their relationship with Jesus, and it just doesn't seem like it's working. And so I have so much compassion simply because I spent so many years feeling the same way, with a heart that really was pure, in the sense that I wanted to stop hurting people. I wanted to know how to be there for my wife and for my kids, and develop these relational skills that, now we're being able to enjoy the fruit of.
Yeah, it's just incredible. I mean, I know your family really intimately, and your boys, and I think the testimony of your life is so powerful, because it's like I literally watched it unfold. At least the part that I know. I know the Todd Pierce that first came to Bethel, and we first went fishing together, and man, watching you grow over these past, I don't know, handful of years has just been incredible. And I think a lot of guys, on some level, like, we all kind of start out in similar stories, not riding horses or whatever, but finding at some point that you're hurting. And a lot of men start out with the same story, unable to really help yourself get well, or even know a right path, right? To change the culture. How do you fix what you grew up in? How do you change what is your normal? And I was talking to, I can't even remember, a group of people the other day. And I was telling, it was a group of men. I lead this breakout AMT. It's advanced ministry training session for school ministry for these college, they're not college students, but adults who came to school ministry to Bethel Church, and now they want to grow in their life. So we have this men's group where I teach them the foundations of masculinity. And I was in there and I was just explaining how when you grow up, like, I was asking the group, how many of you got to decide how you were treated? Of course, no one raised their hands. How many of you got to decide what home you grew up in, whether you're a Christian, non-Christian, what a Republican home, Democrat home? No one raised their hands. How many of you got to decide how you were talked to? No one raised their hands. How many of you in this room got to choose how much freedom you had? Like, you don't. And by the time you're awake and you realize, oh my gosh, I'm alive and I'm making decisions that are impacting my life. Like, you're 15, 16, 17 years old, and the whole foundation, that your whole perception of yourself, the world, who you are, the foundation for your confidence and character and morality and freedom, that's all been developed for you. That was all created for you long before you ever realized, man, I need to make some powerful decisions in life. And even having kids, so I have 5 kids now, and my youngest is 6 months old. Liam, and my daughter Edie's 2 years old. And then of course I've got older kids. There's a 17-year stretch between my littles and my olds. And so what's so interesting is right now on a regular basis, I'm thinking about, I'm creating my son and my daughter's foundation for how they will do the rest of their life. Like that is my gift to them. My gift to them is they will feel lovable because I tell them they're lovable. They'll feel smart because I tell them they're smart. They feel cared about because I nurture them. That, you know, and I'm not bragging on me. I'm literally saying like, that's the foundation. That was what was supposed to be gifted to every child, right?
Right.
But so many men and women didn't even realize, oh my gosh, this operating system that I'm living out of, I didn't create it. It was created for me. And now I'm living out of that, right? Because the psychologists would say by the ages of 4 to 7, 8 years old, you already have your self-esteem, your normals, right, are already established. And no one creates their normals. You know, no one individual goes at 4 years old like, I need to really think about myself in a more positive light.
Yeah, no kidding.
But so it's so fascinating, right? Because when I look at guys like you, right, your story, you come from this culture that's so incredible. Like, again, I have so much respect for the world that you grew up in, the work ethic and the dedication, the loyalty is fierce, and the ownership but then the other side of the coin, right? There's so much pain and just pain inside of it. And like, I think so many guys feel helpless to really turn the corner out of that pain and start to make ground and literally creating a completely new culture in their marriage and the relationship with their kids and the way they see themselves, the relationship with God, right? Because that's when it gets real. Like, how did you practically do that with your wife? And how did you do that with your kids? And how did you do that with yourself? Can you unpack some of that?
Yeah, Jay, you just said so much, because this compassion word is compassion for myself really has to start with what you just said, is that I don't like the word victim, but I really did live like a victim to my world before I even knew that there was such a thing as a victim. And being raised in a culture that does not teach you how to do life in a healthy manner, I didn't choose most of what I believed until I get to choose. But even now that I get to choose, where am I going to go to find out? I would read scripture, but I didn't even understand most of what I was reading. I was fiercely devoted to Jesus. I believed in the reality of Holy Spirit doing these things for us. And then I got this revelation on, man, I'm a father. And why is it that a father wants to see his sons and daughters give to each other and be there for each other? We were wired to glean off of each other's breakthroughs and to do life together. And so much of why it is that people are even listening to this podcast, you at least have somewhat bought into this idea. And so the practical side of it, and everybody's story is so different, that I have to say that back to the humility thing, that I had to not just be able to admit to myself that I needed help, but I needed to admit to my wife, my kids, to men that I trust, that I don't know if you've got the answers or not. I just want you to know that I'm all jacked up, and these are the ways that it's showing up in my life consistently, that everybody in my home feels pressure when I walk in the door. Because guess what? Me being self-critical made me successful. I never gave myself a break. I was ruthless to myself. And we call it self-discipline in my world, but it was cruelty to myself. I didn't understand the concept of having compassion for what's going on inside of me. It was just all weakness. But when the world starts unraveling around you and you realize that the way you've been to yourself is exactly how you're now treating the people around you, and they're feeling the weight of that. Maybe they're not as tough as you. They're not a 4-year-old's not going to understand your 40-year-old version of self-discipline. He's just going to feel like he failed again. Your wife definitely wasn't built for this. And all you're doing is instilling into her a whole bunch of unrealistic expectations that I'm projecting onto her. And so in a really practical way, it had to start with me just being willing to acknowledge that I needed some help and that I wasn't less of a man because of it. In fact, it's the first brave thing. It's the first thing that I've ever done. So I'll start crying just talking about it. But because I wasn't used to doing courageous things, me now being afraid had to activate something new inside of me. And so for the first time in my life, courage looked like, hey, Jay, I really don't know what the hell I'm doing. And this is what's going on. Hey, Leslie, I know I'm hearing you. I'm seeing it. I'm hurting you. I don't know how not to do that. I don't know how to, I almost feel like I want to put a bag over my face because you can read my looks. And I don't want you to read my looks because it's too revealing. And I am critical before I even say it. And so it really is a sobering place to get to. It's as though you're getting born again and again and again, that, oh my God, there's a body and there's a belief system that I have to learn to rule. And this pure heart of Jesus that I carry is really the source of that. And I had to know how to feel compassion for who I was so I could forgive myself, and then invite other people into what's going on so that now I'm not just getting new information. It's what happened at salvation. It's when we realize that, man, my sin has separated me from the God who I love and that loves me. And Jesus fixed that.
Yeah.
How do I implement that into now? I need to be able to forgive myself. And that's going to create this healing inside of me that I now get to give to other people. And it does come in waves, because there's just this glory to glory thing that, we're just on this amazing journey of exploring a kingdom that's eternal. And I don't ever want to stop. I just got done coming out of the Idaho wilderness 2 days ago and did 3 days of just fasting and pray. I didn't even take my horse this time, Jay, because the horse becomes almost like a pacifier for me. I just wanted me and Jesus time. And you feel as though you're kind of suspended between heaven and earth, because the possibility is that we can actually be so one with God that his invisible attributes are what's being imparted into us. But we're never going to be able to bypass. I don't believe, I haven't seen it. We don't get to bypass having these conversations and sharing our life story with other men that we trust, other women that we trust, and inviting this wise counsel into the fact that, are we okay saying we don't know what we're doing and that we need help? And that's why I'm so thankful that you're being so proactive and strategic about building programs and doing a podcast and writing books and making it to where, okay, if you're listening to this and you're finally, okay, I get it. I need help. Help's available. And Jesus wants to partner with what it is that you've got in your heart to do. And that's why I do love the dynamic of what I get to do with a horse, because you can argue with what I say, but you can't argue with what you just saw. And when you see something that's fearful and doesn't know what it's doing, come to a place of yoking itself with infinitely more or larger resource, simply because of this magic of what love and patience looks like, the transformation is available. And that's what we're all going for. We've got this image of, man, how did Jesus do it? Like, he lived in a world of chaos filled with a toxic culture, and he stayed so connected to the Father that he only did what he saw his Father doing. And there we are, man. That's what we're being invited into.
It's awesome and so crazy. You know, I think you nailed it so directly on the head with, you had the first start with you and taking ownership of where you're at, right? And being really honest about, man, something's like, my life sucks right now, or this area of my life. And, you know, getting feedback from your boys. I know that was happening. You just talked about it. Getting feedback from your wife, like, hey man, you're creating a world that I don't like to be around. You know, your wife giving you that feedback. Like, I think the scariest thing on the planet, and I know that some guys will make fun of this, the hardest, most scary thing on the planet is to hear your wife's emotions, like to sit in front of your wife and to hear her disappointment of you. And then for you to have to be vulnerable and be like, I don't know what I'm doing. Like, for whatever reason, at least for me, that's like the most challenging thing on the planet, is to go like, you're so frustrated, you're hurt, you're in pain. I can hear that without like trying to shame her out of that. Like, well, I'm doing all these things and I'm working 40 hours a week. But like, to actually soak that in and be like, oh yeah. And I don't know how to fix this. It was such a like terrifying moment for a man. And to hear your kids go like, which I've experienced all these moments myself, you know, and still do, have kids be like, man, I'm really in pain. Like, this is a real pain point for me, Dad. To really face that stuff head on and not shrug it off with some sort of anger or some sort of justification, but then to have to go, man, how do I fix this? The key is so simple and yet so challenging, because we're never going to outgrow the need, the desperate need for real connection and real honesty. When you have to come to somebody else, like when you have to come to Danny Silk, or when you have to come to me as a friend and go, man, I'm not doing well. I'm in this struggle with my wife. I know that this part's my fault. Like, how do I fix that? That is such an incredible, like, fruitful, but humbling place to be. And man, I watched you do that so much.
Yeah, I think, Jay, I'm thinking of other guys right now, and so many stories that I want to like shake something right now, because our Father is so like here's the deal. When I'm starting with a horse, the problem is the horse doesn't know that he's already fully loved and accepted, and that I'm going to come after you. You can come whenever you decide, but I'm not going away. And so if our Father is literally in your face today saying that I'm not going away, we're going to do this together. And my resource comes through my word. It comes through worship. It comes through our conversations and just intimacy with Holy Spirit. And it's going to come through your brothers. It's going to come through all these other resources, because there's nothing that brings a father more joy than to see his sons loving each other. And I remember the day that, Colton, my oldest, he had gone through 2 years of BSSM, the Bethel School of Ministry, and he was getting all these emotional tools and all these relational tools, and I'm trying to keep up. And it's, some of it's terminology, but a lot of it's just like brand new ideas. Like, Dad, it'd be really helpful to me if I could talk to you about these things that you've hurt me in. And I'm like, oh, hell no. Like, don't forget your spot, boy. I didn't say that, but that's my culture. You don't talk to your dad like that. One, because I'm afraid of what he's going to say. Two, it's a violation of this code that we have of sons don't get to confront their dads.
The pecking order. You're breaking the pecking order, man. I peck on you, you peck on somebody else.
If you want to fight, let's just do it. Like, I can still do that, but no, we're not going to talk about it. But gratefully, in that moment, let me hear it. And it started out as him just telling me something, but then it started escalating on his side. And it's so vivid to me because it was the first time that I actually heard my son tell me what his experience of me was. Because I've got my own perception of what our relationship is like, but I don't know what it's like to be, because he's now talking to me about when he was 6.
Wow.
And so it was just so healing for us to be able to practically start going through some of this stuff. And for me, not, this is what I didn't need to do, and I'm grateful I didn't. One was defend myself and say, well, that's not what I meant, or I didn't want to do that, or start feeling sorry for myself for feeling rejected, and turn it around to where now this is about me. This is about his deal. And this is a lot of stuff that, you've mastered and taught me. But just those moments that I think that we can cultivate in our own homes to where, and I struggle with it, like you said, the worst with my wife, because the worst thing that I can ever hear is that I can't trust you with my heart. That you're so inconsistent that I don't feel safe. Because it sounds to me like, okay, now you've just attacked you're not just saying that I'm doing something wrong. You're saying that I'm wrong. Like, there's something fundamentally broken in me, and it feels so like rejection. And so if you got to be ready before you ask for it, because if you're going to create a space for your family to be honest with you, it's going to be so healing, and it's so worth it. But you've got to make sure that your heart's healed enough to where you don't turn the sword on your family, because then they never talk again. Yeah,
it's true. And man, I mean, I know you and I can get super fired up about this to the point where it's like unleash the beast. But I mean, that is why we both do what we do, right? And I think I just want to challenge the men listening to this. Like, this to me is like an invitation, right? It's an invitation to go to the next level of intentionality, of humility, of connection, of relationship with yourself, with God, with real human beings in your life who want to know you, who want to grow with you, who want to build you up, and get out of this place where we continue to repeat the same mistakes, the same culture that we grew up with. And it takes some courageous steps. The truth is that you don't have to know how to get yourself to where you want to be. You have to be courageous enough to be willing to invite people into your life. Yeah. And to be honest enough and to continue the pursuit of that. And I mean, that is the fruit of your life. the fruit of your life is like, it's not like, oh, you knew how to, solve or respond perfectly to your son. You just went like, man, now I'm responsible for this information. Like, I got to go figure out how to live life differently. Like, I got to go figure out how to be a dad in a way that I've never had to. And I just can't even explain to men how often I'm doing that. Myself, I grew up in a good home. How often am I coming back to the point where I'm like, oh, this place right here needs some real honesty, some real truth, some real humility. And my freaking ego wants to hide it all, right? Like my fear wants to I just want to pretend that thing's not there. And, but it's just so freeing and so incredible when you don't have to pretend that you have a good life, when you don't have to pretend that you have real relationships, but you actually do it.
I know that every man wants to be known as being noble, and doesn't matter what culture you're raised in. There's something that God put in us, hardwired us. And to me, especially at this stage in life, that I want my sons, and they have adopted very early on, is that if nothing's hidden, I've got nothing to be afraid of. The only thing that is going to take you out is the stuff that gets hidden. And it's not just like, are you watching porn, or have you told a lie, or this is actually just, there's nowhere that we're not willing to go in special relationships. It can't be with just anybody. You and I have chose to live our lives on display. So I'll say this in front of everybody, but there can be nothing hidden. That's just kind of a core value of our home. And it's hard to hear sometimes, but when you go down this path, it really is this invitation of no longer being formed by the ways of the world, but we are being transformed, and we're becoming what it is that I love to hear you say over and over again, Jay. We're becoming the original intent of God for humanity, that the world has experienced freedom for too long, that we don't even have any character, and our freedom is destroying us. And so these men that are listening to this podcast, women, I'm assuming it now are as well, let's just get honest, and get honest enough with ourselves that we can at least start the process, because there's no contest. Nobody's trying to compare anything anymore. We've all got stuff that just needs to be dealt with, and none of us want to hurt the people around us. And there's men like you that are just being forerunners in it, and just saying, hey, we got a world that wants to talk about everything anyway. So let's actually talk about truth. Let's find out what's actually going on in this human heart, so that if Jesus said that I get to be the light of the world, that I get to be an image bearer of the one that I call my King, that I actually do have an opportunity to represent him along a company of other people, so that the world will know that we really are like a city on a hill, that the world's being drawn to its likeness, like they want to be like us. And that's, I believe, an invitation that every man should want to respond to, that no other time in history have we needed men, or have men been available and have the privilege of being able to stand in front of the world and say, this is what it looks like to be masculine.
Man, I love it. Todd, you are one of the most courageous men that I know. It's just so fun to be able to do this and to live life like this. Like, what a privilege. I'd love for you to pray for us and just impart your courage to men. And would you do that for us?
Yeah, for sure. Father, thank you that you started this impossible journey of what it looks like to see the human heart redeemed. And we all just want to admit that our sin, man, it just separated us from everything. And so thank you for teaching us how to love and caring enough to demonstrate how violent love will look like when it's going after something that it cares for. And we just make a decision before you and consecrate our hearts to you that we want to be whole the way you intended us to. And we know that you paid the price so that we can have this. So we just honor you as the giver of life and ask you, Holy Spirit, even through my words, as I declare over everyone listening to this, that you have the courage of God. You have a love that makes it to where fear no longer has to hold you hostage. And Father, thank you for tools. And I just speak words of knowledge and wisdom over everybody that is listening right now, that you're going to have dreams and visions that are going to be very direct instructions on who to connect with, where to go to with the resources, how to begin being super honest with yourself without shame. In fact, it's shame. I come against you in Jesus' name. You have no authority over any of these people. And we just receive the covering that comes from the blood of Jesus. And thank you that you always finish what you start. So thank you for letting us be men that bear your image. And when you created us in your image, we want to see that. So we just dedicate our lives to you again in becoming whole. And I ask you to continue to bless BraveCo and my friend Jason as a man that has chose to just step outside the crowds and say, as for me and my house, we're going to follow the Lord. And that's you, Jesus. So we bless them in Jesus' name.
Amen.
Amen.
Todd, thank you so much, man. Thanks for taking time out of your sabbatical to be with us and to share your story with us and just give an impartation to every man that's listening. So thanks so much, man. I love you.
Love you too, Jay.
And BraveCo, man, hopefully this motivates you this week, inspires you to go to the next level of intentionality and relationship with the men around you, with God and the people that you love the most. So have an incredible week. Stay brave. Hey guys, thanks so much for listening to the BraveCo podcast. If you like this podcast, would you please rate it, review it, leave us a great comment. And if you like this episode in particular, share it with your friends and family. That helps us to spread the word. Guys, stay brave. We'll see you next week.